In today's Community Focus, our monthly live interview with head of the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training, Director Matt Weldon, joining us today via Zoom. Director, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me back.
Director, we fortunately continue seeing the unemployment rate drop here in Rhode Island. Bring us up to speed on the latest data you're looking at.
The March jobs data came out last week, and it's a good report. And I tell you, I think every time that we shouldn't look at one report as like the perfect picture of Rhode Island's economy, but look over a period of time. And over the last year, we have really seen some economic growth. You know, Rhode Island has been the leader in the Northeast for our rebounding from the pandemic, and in the top 10 in the country for the way our economy has rebounded. Last week, we reported that Rhode Island's unemployment rate in March was 3.4%. That's a half a point beneath what it was in February. Massachusetts for the same time period is 4.3, Connecticut's 4.6, and the U.S. rate is 3.6. We're beneath all of those now. We're a leader in the region. We're gaining jobs. We regained now 85% of the jobs that we lost in the pandemic. We're certainly headed in the right direction.
What a change from a year ago. Good news there. You know, as your office is looking at data like what you were just explaining, do you ever look at where there are pockets where unemployment just seems to continue and what the challenges are there, whether it's access to transportation or limited education resources? Does your office boil down those numbers to kind of a geographic idea?
We do, and we work, on behalf of the federal government, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We run a number of programs, and we do some statewide efforts too. And most important is we're here to help. And so whether it be municipal leaders or state elected officials that reach out to us to ask us to help communities throughout Rhode Island, that's what we want to do. We want to use the resources we have available to connect people with real opportunities as quickly as we can to make them part of Rhode Island's economic success.
Director, we've talked here on 12 News at 4 about unemployment overpayment during the pandemic. Not talking about fraud, but sort of accidental overpayment of benefits during the pandemic. That's been back in the headlines recently as Massachusetts addresses how they're going to offer some relief to those being asked to pay back that money. But I know Rhode Island is handling this a little bit differently. So can you remind folks again how they should handle it if they know they've been overpaid, or how they could even find that out?
Sure. Most importantly, we don't want anybody that was using the unemployment system the right way to be harmed. And so I've intentionally slow walked this process. We're very deeply involved in a policy review and a policy reform here at DLT that will treat overpayments a little bit differently. And the issue isn't always whether or not someone was overpaid. The issue is whether or not they have to pay it back. And so we're looking at those federal resources. We're looking at what other states like Massachusetts are doing. And we're going to take a nice, slow approach to make sure that we're not harming anyone, but we're also protecting the system. Most important, if you received a notice from us that you overpaid and you disagree, you should appeal it. There are due process rights that you have. That buys some time to work through the process. We don't want you to be harmed if you're using the system to support yourself.
And I know I've asked you this before. In Massachusetts, they made an estimated $1.6 billion in those overpayments. Any clarity on what that figure is here in Rhode Island?
Not yet, Kim, and that number changes all the time because it may not be necessarily an overpayment once we review that policy and change it. And that's why it's really something that we have to keep working on and then report out when it's done. And it's one of those things that I just can't say when that's going to happen. Much like what we did with our new online system for unemployment, we took our time, we rolled out what I think is a very strong product. We're going to do the same thing with this.
And Director, I understand there are 2 new grant programs. The Governor's Workforce Board recently reopened. What should folks know about those?
So we recently reopened the Work Immersion Program, which is a way to get people some work experience, like an internship that's paid, and the state, through the Governor's Workforce Board, will help subsidize those wages at some percentage level. They can go to gwp.ri.gov, that's the Governor's Workforce Board's website, to find more information about that. We also reopened the incumbent worker training grants, and those are for companies that need to upskill their existing staff to keep them competitive and to keep their staff mobile through their career pathway. Again, gwb.ri.gov has information on both of those programs, both aimed at getting people connected to good opportunities and to upskilling them.
All right, Rhode Island DLT Director Matt Weldon, that is all the time that we have for today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And looking ahead to tomorrow, when Rhode Island Education Commissioner Angelica Infante Green will be joining us for our monthly interview with her. That's coming up in tomorrow's Community Focus.